Hey everyone, it's Melanie Johnson here. Thanks for joining us for another super great podcast. So, I have a surprise for you today. Jen is out today, and we have Julie Conto here with us. She's a financial advisor. And wouldn't you know it, her dad is our guest today. So, we're having like double dipping on this today. Her dad is iconic. He started at Payne Weber. He has been the chairman of Hilton Hotels. He was part of Redstone, was chairman of Redstone, which then acquired other financial institutions. They changed names. He is such a wealth of information. And he was even the biggest Whataburger franchise owner. So I'm really curious about that. So you're in for a super special treat. First of all, Julie, welcome. Thanks for coming today as my co-host.
Well, thank you, Melanie. I'm excited to be here.
This is great. So, and thank you, David Solomon. So pleased to have you here today. Thanks for joining us for this podcast.
Happy to be here. Happy to visit with you.
So tell us a little bit, how did you get started? Like, start us back kind of from your after high school, college days. How did your journey start?
Wow. The beginning was I graduated from Bel Air High School, pitched the winning championship baseball game, went on to UT, spent 2 years there. My dad had built a fairly large business in the women's kind of fabric stores, 36 stores on the East Coast, on the West Coast, 36 stores here in the Gulf Coast, I mean. And after he ran into certain financial problems, I moved back to Houston without graduating college. So I came to help him. At the age of 21, my parents got divorced, and I went to a bank in the Med Center and borrowed $450,000 to help them settle their divorce, bought 2 fabric stores, put my mother in business. I hated the business. And then later in the story, you'll learn I went on to buy Med Center Bank.
Courage to borrow $400,000. What year was that?
That would have been 1974. And no college education, no net worth. I managed to borrow from Med Center Bank $450,000.
That's like over $4 million today. I mean,
It is.
That's it. That's crazy.
It's a crazy beginning. We don't need to focus just on that because there's so much more that.
Yeah, let's keep going. Yep.
No, that comes from that.
But I love that you didn't have that. You just had the courage and you just walked through fear to think that you could do that. And
I had no education. I was 21 years old. I walked into the board of directors and said, "You have my pledge. I will pay you back." There was no, at the time, the regulatory environment may have been easier.
Yeah.
Was easier, but somehow they had the faith in me. And so I put my mom in business. I was stuck in the business. I owned 2 fabric stores in Houston, Texas. I hated it. All my friends were becoming accountants and lawyers, and I was putting boxes in the trash behind a fabric store and dealing with women. Not that I don't mind dealing with women, but so my point is I went and got a real estate license. And with that, I ended up in Fort Worth, Texas, a very large family, probably one of the first billionaires in the United States. And I ran into the guy that was running their family office named Richard Rainwater. Richard Rainwater saw me. "What are you doing here?" "I'm going to see your real estate department." He said, "Well, come on in my office. I have to take this call." I did. He had to be in Las Vegas the next day to buy a hotel from Del Webb, who was in trouble because they couldn't get their gaming license in New Jersey. So I flew up there as a 22-year-old, no suit. I had a sport coat. And long story short, wow, the sides were both, these were heated discussions. And he left when the CEO and chairman came over to me. He left me. And the CEO chairman said, "What are you doing here? And who are you?" Because I was young. And I said, "Well, look, I'm thinking about doing something with the Bass family, which is the family that I'm speaking of. And I'm convinced today that Richard used me to keep them off balance." It was quite an education just there. On the airplane home, he started to ask me questions about who I am, what I was, what I wanted to do. I said, I want to go in the real estate business. 1981, he said, I think things may get difficult in the real estate business in Texas over the next few years, especially Houston. He said, if you can go get a job in the wealth management brokerage, stock brokerage business, we do 5% of the volume on the New York Stock Exchange on a daily basis. We can take the risk out of going into business. I got a job. And he lived up to his thing. He says, I'm not going to make you rich. I'm going to take the risk out. And thus my career began.
I'd like you to, can you step back for 1 second and I think it's fair we bring mom into this equation, and maybe because of me too, but at this age, explain to us how you're.
I know where Julie's going. I came back and said, I think I'm going to go in the brokerage business. And Marcia, my wife of 48 years, was pregnant with Julie. And she kept saying, no, you came up here to go in the real estate business. I don't think that's right. I made the change. And honestly, I sold my stores. And honestly, they turned our electricity off because I couldn't pay my power bills while she was rocking Julie as an infant. So I can go forward. I got in the business, and once again, no college education, no knowledge of the business, but I ended up meeting somebody. I got a strange phone call, and it was, can you come have lunch with my client? It was a CPA, and I did, and turned out to be one of the heirs to the Koch brothers in Wichita, Kansas. I didn't know. She wouldn't tell me. She didn't say a word at the lunch. I called Richard Rainwater, who's very well connected, and said, what do you know going on? He says, I don't know anything. Turns out the two Koch brothers, Charles and David, bought out their brothers, and they bought out Gay Roan, who I met. And I ended up with her account. She asked me in a meeting subsequent to that, put together, because she was interviewing everybody in town. Goldman Sachs did the LBO. She came back and said, put together what you suggest I do with my money. And everybody else had these formal plans. I drove to the meeting in my gray Honda. And long story short, said, I'm going to spend a year with you. Interest rates were at 15%. We'll park the money in treasury bills, take no risk, and for a year, I will teach you what you can do. I ended up with the account. It infuriated everybody in Houston, because I then went on to build a family office for her and her 3 kids. And then that became Redstone.
Do you think it was that different that you were going to teach her versus doing it for her? You were in bringing her in, like you really had the client in mind more than just yourself and making money? What do you think was
There is no question that I was young. There's no question she didn't have the knowledge. There is no question that I have seen so many fortunes lost because they entrusted those people with no knowledge. And I felt more comfortable for me if I could get to know her, I could spend time with her, if I could teach her, and that the dollars for me would come in time. And I would tell you in spades that if we're talking about people that's in that business, it's not selling the product or the next investment. It's selling yourself. And once they get that trust, you no longer need to sell. And so I could go on and on about, she and I built a huge relationship. She was like my sister. She had 3 kids that weren't productive citizens. I helped nurture them. I ended up managing all 3 of their trusts and had to answer to her cousin, Bill Koch, who's a tough guy, and remind you that I was 23, 24, no college education. So that was the very beginning of, and I can keep talking unless you have questions.
Well, take us, Julie. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think that hits the big part of his beginning career at Red
So
Star.
here's what goes on. We were successful when I was at Payne Weber. We were successful. I answered to a guy named Bill Koch, one of the biggest guys in this country. And for 5 years, as things deteriorated in Texas, if you remember the bust in the late 80s, because she had liquidity, the whole world was coming her way, wanting her to do deals. For 5 years, I said no to every single thing. And then one day I went to her in 1988 and said, hey, will you back me? There's all of these distressed assets that we can buy. And without hesitation, sell yourself first, not the deal. She never even asked about the deals. My first purchase was a 300-room Hilton Hotel on the West Chase Hilton that was built by George Ballas, the creator of the Weed Eater, took his wealth after he sold his business and built for $28 million the West Chase Hilton. I bought it out of bankruptcy, fighting a guy named Jerry Moore, who was a big retail center guy who had already done all the homework, done all the due diligence, had financing lined up, was going to give Ballas $500,000 if he bought the property. And I went into bankruptcy court. The judge was furious because he said, Mr. Solomon, do you own any real estate? Have you bought a hotel? Do you have financing lined up? And I said, no. I looked like a fool the whole time. Finally, he came and said, hey, it's getting close to Christmas. You guys both come in with a sealed bid and you can't raise it. So I literally went to First Interstate Bank where Gay Roan banked, and I got cashier's checks starting with $8 million, $1 million, 500,000, 250,000. I called her and I said, Gay, she was in Colorado, what's the max you'll pay for the property? She wouldn't answer me. She just said, go do it. And so I got in the courtroom. He opened the bids. It said 10 million from Jerry Moore, which is a number I had heard. And 500,000 was going to go to George Ballas, the owner of the hotel. So the creditors were going to get 950,000. I bid 10 million. And so the judge ruled Jerry Moore, because he had done the due diligence, he had done the homework, and I had a clause that said 60 days due diligence. And he said, so for that reason, I'm going to award the hotel to Jerry Moore. I stood up immediately and said, I'll close under the same conditions, thinking that if Jerry Moore is buying this, he's very established. He knows what he's doing. He had done the homework. I was awarded the hotel. That was the first transaction I ever did. And so we can go on and on. That's how I entered the hotel business. That's how Gay Roan did. Then we went on, and I can tell detailed stories of the Houstonian out of bankruptcy, fighting. The owner was from Qatar, a name known widely now. And I bought the Hyatt Regency in Austin, Texas, in bankruptcy, kind of in the same. So that's the hotel business. That's how we kind of got started.
So you found distressed properties. Timing is everything. And you had the wherewithal to sit on all that cash and those assets for 5 years, which a lot of people would not have the patience. It's like you could almost see that things were going to change.
Melanie, you're so right. It's easy today in hindsight. I'm amazed even at myself. This is not being self-serving, but things were happening fast. And I could then tell you that my business degree was from Richard Rainwater. He was a value buyer. I became a value buyer. We bought the first failed bank in the state of Texas. I knew nothing about banking, but we bought the first failed bank in the state of Texas. We put up the original capital because a guy named Rick Campa, who's a name notably in Houston, runs the Port of Houston, ran a lot of other things. I put up the original capital for him to buy his first 2 apartment projects. He came out of Ken Schnitzer's organization. And today, his multifamily company that I backed is now a $10 billion, manages and owns 60,000 units across the country, and is one of the companies, and this will be a theme that I really do want to touch on, company that has been awarded by Forbes, Fortune, Houston Chronicle, Houston Business Journal as the best companies to work for. And so that will permeate all of my conversations as it relates to quality. Gay Roan had a lot of money. Didn't matter how much money I made her. If I hurt her reputation, that would hurt her. So I lived by that credo. Not just because of that, I hope, but being young, and I knew that, I hope I would have gone and done the same thing.
And I love that because it's like you had her reputation in mind. So even though you were looking for distressed properties, you wanted quality properties. What would you tell someone in today's market what they should be doing? What kind of advice for like an investor or someone getting started today?
As an investor, my strategy, there is a strategy, but we never went that direction to buy, not distressed, but lower end. I always found higher end, great locations will hold their value. And for me, investing somebody that already has a lot of money, store of value, but even if you don't have a lot of money, store of value is great in certain properties. I would tell you, hotels that are greatly located are a great store of value. The very wealthy go that direction. And so anybody starting out, finding something that has longevity, sustainability is my advice there. I still look for some form of value. You're not going to find the distressed level that I found, but buying a little bit better than the guy on the street is a huge advantage. Think through this. The West Chase Hilton I bought for $10 million. Every hotel built around me that hadn't gone through bankruptcy, like I was fortunate enough, and this applies to any asset, but if I have a hotel I paid $10 million for, I can charge 30% of your rates and still make money. And so as you think through this, on any asset purchase, any bank business, you have to have some form of an advantage.
So, and you know, the other thing that gets me is that several times you said, I bought a hotel, knew nothing about running a hotel. I bought a bank, knew nothing about running a bank. I mean, that scares me to death. It's like, oh, you're going to buy this business and you know nothing about it. You might know how to run a business. So how did you go about figuring out how to run a bank, how to run a hotel, to get the right people in? Because obviously you weren't stepping in and being the general manager of the hotel or the bank necessarily.
A great story. The first hotel, the West Chase Hilton. I went to board meetings and they were talking about their swimming pool needed help. Well, how do I know anything about a swimming pool? So this is another major tenet throughout my career. I am not the smartest guy in the room. I am not the guy that knows how to slice and dice. I am not the guy that can build that spreadsheet. I talked about relationships. I know how to read people. I would go find and structure a deal to find the best people to help me, whether it be the hotel, whether it be to run the bank, whether it to be to run the apartments, whether it to be run Whataburger. I never was on the firing line. I pick people. I think I pick people well. I don't mean to be self-serving, but for me, I could do so much more because I'm not the operator. That I know, I recognize my talents, but I can smell. I love the art of the deal. I love that piece of it with very smart people. So when I bought the West Chase Hilton, I hired a guy that knew a lot about the hotel business. And then he knew somebody in Dallas, knew a lot about the hotel business. So they helped me. And they were in the lane of where you could find the Houstonian, although I found the Houstonian. But my point being, it was more about identifying the right operators than it was me being smart enough to run a single business. If I ran one single business, I couldn't have done anything more.
You know, and I, Dad, you found the right people. And I would say that it was probably somewhat easier for you because you were somebody that they wanted to work for. And I think that carries through with just everyone wanting to always be around you, whether it be the waiters, whether it be your employees, whether it be businessmen, whether it be friends. So I think if you can touch on that a little bit, and, Houstonian employees, when I would go visit, all they would do is rave about, oh, he's so nice, and you're just a people person. So explain your thoughts on that and how that came about.
So I can say this. I ran, there's a group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And YPO was 50 years ago, a 30-year-old whose dad died, and he inherited a large business. He had no peers to talk to. And he built what is today YPO. It's in countries all over the world. And he used it for not just the business side, it was self-growth. How do you raise a wealthy family and make your kids responsible? So it's all self-growth, included spouses, included children. Julie is even a part of YPO today. And so my point being, in YPO, they not separate you. You join what they call a forum, and it's probably 8 people, women and men, who have obviously, to join YPO, you had to run a business of certain caliber, $50 million in revenue, X amount of employees before the age of 40. I qualified. I got in. I became chairman. I ran the education department. The point I'm making is, within the forum, at age 50, you leave YPO. At age 52, I had already left YPO, but I got a brain tumor. And I had cancer in my brain. And my group said, come back, because part of the entire thing of the forum is confidentiality. Number one, you don't share a thing. It's like your own personal board of directors, but it's not just business, it's personal. It's an amazing concept. And so they called me back at age 52 because of my cancer. And while I was there, after the first 2 or 3 months, they said, David, you've got this under control. Will you teach us? How does a man, a family, business person, employees, how do you deal with the news you've been given, going through treatment, radiation, chemo, all that? And so I did the presentation, and it was not as expected that, balance, family, do all that. And mine was, what I think has made me successful, having looked back. Successful, yes, money could be a piece of it, but happiness for you, happiness for the people around you, joy was relationships. I think, in my mind, and this goes back to, Julie, your comment, yes, if I walk into a restaurant, I treat the waiters as if they've been my best friend for years, except for I just keep asking them questions, because I find in life so hard. And that is the way of life. So don't think this is too hokey, but why should they be waiting on me? We both grew up. We both somehow had childhoods, and we both put our pants on the same way. But if you ask Julie, she can tell you over and over again, my relationships are very important to me.
I think that really makes such a big difference when you're building a team and having the relationship with your family, your employees, everyone that outreaches, that you touch everyone. And I love that you say that, you care for everyone the same, no matter what position they're in, and they feel that from you.
Ask Julie, because she's been there. They do feel that. Marcia and I had a waiter. So we used to go every Monday night just to give him a little bit of money. His wife worked 2 jobs, cleaning hotel rooms and office buildings at night. I offered to bring her to the Houstonian to teach her English. They would make our son, Julie's brother, Jeff, birthday is the 4th of July. They would call and say, meet us in the parking lot. And they would have made margaritas, flan, bread pudding, and whatever. The day Castro died, I was at a Cuban restaurant with Rolando, my friend, who I just met as my waiter. We were the only people that visited. I helped him get into, because I had cancer. So he came to me one night and he says, Mr. David, I have what you had. Cancers were different, but I got him into MD Anderson. We're the only people that went to visit him. my point being, people are incredibly important. That's just a slideshow. Houstonian, what we did, what I helped create because of Gay Roan, scholarships for the employees' children. We created Thanksgiving where literally we passed out turkeys to every employee. My son went to work there when he was in high school. And even though we owned the place and he could go to whatever venue to eat and do what he did, he never told anybody his last name. He would eat in the employee cafeteria. So my children have adopted.
Squeegee the tennis courts at 6 a.m. after a big rain. So he was a hard worker.
Yeah, my point being, and even that's when 1993, 94, the Rockets went to the championship. We had seats on the floor for the playoff games. He never asked, can I miss work this Saturday? So my point is, I'm hoping, and I know for a fact with my children, it's not just words, it's they see your actions. And so, yes, I know I'm talking too much about me, but people are so important.
How do you raise kids? I mean, I know Julie personally, she's a super hard worker, very motivated. How do you raise kids that are coming up with all of this money and all of these luxuries in their life to still be motivated and be hard workers and productive? Like you said, Aaron's kids weren't necessarily productive.
I'm telling you without being wrong, but I see that unproductive citizens coming up in these generations. I managed my early days, some of the largest families' wealth, and saw their children watching cartoons all day long, not being productive citizens. And so I don't have the secret sauce outside of, it's not just the words, it's what they watch. It's how they see you treat people. It's see how you work. Do you want to be successful? My wife used to get so mad at me because we didn't have chores and an allowance. I didn't go that route. But what I did see was them adhering, them treating people right, another common theme, but treating people right, them doing well in school, them being appreciative for their things. And yeah, I have laid awake at nights thinking I made it too easy on my son. Yeah, he went to UT. He was a frat rat. I got sick. He moved back to Houston and he came back to me and said, Dad, I don't think I have the tools. And on his own, he went and got in Columbia University Business School. So my point is, it's all in your actions. And when I saw what Julie just raised, that he did what he did at the Houstonian, that he did interview. Obviously, he was going to get the job, but he did squeegee tennis courts. He did not go to the fancy parts of the Houstonian, didn't tell him his name. I said, that's how I'm going to measure him, not through an allowance and his chores at home. So I don't know if that answers your question. We just steadfastly have believed, and I think Julie could answer this better than me, but I think how we treated others, how we both were very loyal to us, loyal to the people around us. And I think the vision of that was very helpful.
I agree. And just a quick funny story is I remember coming home from school one day and our housekeeper, who we adored dearly, one time she was on the treadmill. My mom was making her get her heart in shape, and so she had Irma on the treadmill. And then another time my mom was giving her a massage, and I'm like, this is a whole new different thing. But we loved her as family, and I think it's what we see as what our parents do that we learned so much from.
Julie, can I say something? Didn't you try to teach her to swim in our backyard?
I did. I taught Irma how to swim. That didn't go very well. That's another great.
But we also did some crazy stuff. Because we're capable, we bought her a home for her and her husband. So my children got to see that. We gave her some of our old furniture. They witnessed that. And so it's not all about us. It's not about, we didn't buy all the fancy things. We had very nice things, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't the center of our life. So it's a great question. It's a very good question.
How important is leaving a legacy for you?
It didn't used to be very important. But as I get older, it was never my intention. I always loved what I did. I told you I loved the art of the deal. I had the great fortune to meet somebody, build a relationship, never asked me about a transaction we did. So I got to get out there and play. And I tried to build an organization that when I got older, I could still play with the big boys. I could still do what I do. And so the legacy for me, it's really not about me. I am so proud of my children. And today I am so proud of my grandchildren. My 2-year-old grandson, I used to take to Carrabba's on Kirby to lunch, just him and me, every Friday. And so I would tell you today, because of my insistence, he loves bread. And this is minute, but it's not. I could tell you that I would walk in the restaurant and they would deliver him a plate of steamed vegetables, broccoli, carrots, asparagus, whatever. And he'd have to eat that before he ate anything else. And so my point being, the relationship built there, and you talk about a legacy. He has, Melanie, come up to me at young age and said, he calls me Big D. My name is David, but I'm Big D. He says, Big D, would you rather have all the money in the world and live to 70 or no money and live to 120? So you think about that. Where was
How did you answer? How did you answer that?
I said, Grayson, there's so much to that question. You have to understand, do I have my health? Do I have friends? Do I have my kids and all those pieces? And if you tell me yes to all those things, that's easier for me to answer than just in black and white. And he says, well, let me ask you a question. He says, I think you have enough money. Why don't you have a Ferrari? And I said, Grayson, that's just not me. You have to understand. And that all goes back to, how do you raise affluent children? That all goes back to, how do you teach them to be responsible citizens? You can tell from me, the legacy question that you ask, my legacy is much more about my family. I am so proud of what Julie, who was not a working mom, has accomplished. I'm stunned at what she's accomplished and managed her family in such a way that the 2 children are going to be amazing citizens. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, and even doing this podcast with us today, we're so grateful that part of your knowledge and your wisdom is now being shared with our audience, that they'll have nuggets that they can take and use with their family, their business, and inspire them of things that you've done and walked through and had the courage to do without thinking twice about doing it. It's just so impressive that I think a lot of people will be touched by it.
I hope it leads to their happiness, because I'm a happy individual. I'm a out of the box kind of guy, but treating people brings happiness. And it's overused. What goes around comes around, karma, all that. I just know it works. And so I have to share one last story if we have time.
Sure.
Because of the Houstonian, I got to know George and Barbara Bush, President 41. He lived at the hotel. The night he gave his concession speech in 1992, he had lost to Bill Clinton. He was in Houston, and he's coming back from his announcement at NRG Stadium, and he calls the Houstonian. 1992, I had just bought the hotel, and they call me and they said, the president is coming back to the hotel. He wants any employee that wants to come visit with him and Barbara. Wow. He wants to spend some time with them to say goodbye. And there is an example of one of the most important men in the world and his spouse, after huge defeat, had the willingness, the time, the desire, and he stood at 45 minutes in the lobby, kissing all the housemaids goodbye. And so if he can do that, why can't I do something special? So it's an incredible story. So I'll leave you with this. We got to know him. We sponsored a golf tournament for Jim Nance, Freddie Couples, and Blaine McAllister at my golf club. And it was a charity that raised a lot of money. And it was 2 days. And the president would come out every time, spend the day with us on the golf course, and then on a Saturday night have a banquet. Well, at the banquet, he would sit at a table to share the wealth, and Barbara would sit at the table. And so when you talk about my willingness to step out, I can't say they're like my best friends. I can't say I've hung around presidents, but I can say I sat next to Barbara Bush with Marcia on my side. And it was back when their grandchildren, the girls, were drinking in Austin, Texas at Chewy's, and they got in trouble. So I asked, and Miss Bush, she made me call her Bar. So except that she insisted I call her Bar. So I said, Bar, tell me about the girls. What were they doing? And Marcia's kicking me under the table, because what I'm saying is I would ask the hard questions. I don't get a chance to hang with presidents like that.
Right.
So I don't want to be just a cowering, sissy. So I said, tell me about the girls. And she goes, David, George and I just had this conversation. She made me call him George. George and I had this conversation, and it was girls. I wrote them a letter and said, you have the privilege of flying on Air Force One, taking your friends to Camp David in the White House. You have to respect your father and not do that. And she said, George won't let me send the letter because he's afraid they won't talk to us again. So here we go real fast. Because of my involvement at MD Anderson, because he was chairman of MD Anderson, they give a massive fundraising on Kenny Buckport every year. We got invited, part of 8 couples. I wouldn't be invited if it was just personally going to their house, but we're on the bus, we're going for dinner, and we walk in the house, and I see Jim Nance, who I know very well. So I try to go up. Secret Service says, no, you can't go over there. You have to go get in line, take the traditional picture with the bushes in front of the fireplace. We stood in line, we got there. The president kissed Marcia, and I looked at Bar, and I said, Bar, what's Nance doing here? And she grabbed me out of the line. She threw me with my lapels against the wall. The whole place is watching, waiting. And she says, if you tell anybody, I'll kick your butt. And I said, well, what is it? She goes, well, Bill Clinton is due here tomorrow. And President George is not allowed to be alone with Bill Clinton. So my point is, I've got to experience some amazing things because of the businesses that I ran.
And the successes. Well, David Solomon, it has been just a pleasure and an honor to have you on our podcast today. And thank you for sharing so much and giving us the colorful, beautiful stories, not just about business, but also about your family. And Julie, thanks for coming as well and being a part of this whole process. It worked out great. We're so happy that you were here.
Great. Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
All right. Well, check us out next time. We're always here for another great podcast. And if you're looking to write a book, remember, we work with our authors to make them #1 bestsellers at Elite Online Publishing. Go to our website and hit that author submission button. We'll see you next time. Have a fantastic week, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.